Have you ever been in a situation where everything seemed to be under control, but suddenly everything changed unexpectedly? Imagine the scene. A thief decides to break into a roadside motel in Texas, believing he has found an easy opportunity, an empty room where he could commit his crime without being seen. He thinks that his blow will be quick, quiet, without major consequences. But what seemed like a night of easy profit turns into a nightmare quickly and unexpectedly. Have you ever wondered what happens when nature decides to teach you a lesson in instant justice? This is exactly what happened in this incident, a story that looks like something out of a movie, but which is completely real and happened on American soil. The criminal's action in forcing the window of a motel room seemed, for a moment, a simple move, an attempt to steal something without attracting attention. However, he did not imagine that when he tried to invade that seemingly empty space, he would end up hitting an abandoned box under the roof. Initially, it looked like just rubble, a bag or pieces of garbage left there by some traveler. But it was actually a nest of giant American marimbondos, a species known for its impressive size and aggressive behavior. And it was exactly at that moment that everything changed dramatically, turning an attempted robbery into a scene of pure natural chaos. You stay with me until the end, because what comes next will amaze you with the intensity of the attack and the violence of nature, which decided to act instantly against the invader. The attack of the marimbondos was so fierce that the thief, desperate, fell to the ground, screaming for help, while realizing that he had just become involved in a much bigger situation than he imagined. The motel guests, frightened, rushed to see what was happening, witnessing a scene that looked like something out of a thriller. The police were quickly called, and within minutes arrived at the scene, finding the criminal covered in stings, begging for help, completely desperate. This story, which gained prominence in the local media, became an example of how justice can come unexpectedly, naturally and ruthlessly, when it is least expected. But what exactly happened from that moment? What lessons can we draw from this story? Stay with me, because in the next part we will understand the details of this surprising intervention of nature and the outcome of this story that will surely arrest you. And this story of the thief and the giant marimbondos in Texas not only shows us how unforgiving nature can be, but also makes us reflect on the unpredictability of life. When we think we are in control, it reminds us that often everything can change from one moment to the next, in surprising and even brutal ways. Have you ever been in a situation where something unexpected caught you by surprise, whether it was a matter of nature or a turn of life? Share here in the comments, because your experience can help others understand that sometimes the universe has its own ways of acting. Your opinion is important and encourages us to continue bringing real stories that make us think, reflect, and above all, learn. If this type of content makes sense to you, leave your like because it helps the channel grow and reach more people who also like amazing stories and life lessons. In addition, if you want to stay on top of everything that happens and follow stories that are out of the ordinary, subscribe to the channel. Your participation is what makes this space better and better, creating a community of people who value the unexpected, the exciting, and the learning that comes from each experience. So, do not waste time, continue with me, because the story is not over yet, and what comes next will surprise you even more. It was a warm, quiet night in a typical Texas roadside motel. The sky, starry, looked like a vast dark mantle dotted with bright spots, while the heavy air made even the few guests who were there feel a little slower, more relaxed, as if the world outside was pausing. The parking lot, dimly lit by dim yellow lights, conveyed a sense of tranquility but also vulnerability. Each shadow seemed to hide a secret. Each movement was silent, almost as if the environment itself was waiting for something to happen. In the midst of that backdrop, the silence seemed as heavy as the warmth of the air, creating an atmosphere that both invited peace and danger. Some people were resting in their huts. Others were drinking something at the bar or chatting quietly in the common area. The routine of that place took its course without major events until a figure stood out in the gloom. It was someone with a clear intention in his head, moving cautiously, almost like a specter in the night. The thief, believing that that night would be another on the list of easy thefts, had chosen that place because he believed that there, possibly, he would find something valuable, or at least an opportunity to escape unnoticed. His strategy seemed simple. Go in, grab what he could, and disappear before anyone noticed. He knew that the landscape seemed peaceful, but he also knew that in practice, this calm is often an illusion, a facade that hides invisible dangers. The environment, with its combination of isolation and vulnerability, created a perfect setting for those who wanted to act in the shadows. The heavy silence of the night was broken only by his careful steps, quick breathing, and the hope that everything would be quick and quiet. He approached one of the huts, focused on the window he was trying to force, believing that there would be no one there. Every movement was meticulous. Every attempt to open the window felt like a mission of precision, as if defying the silence that reigned in the place. In his head, everything seemed under control, a simple move that would give the expected return without attracting attention. However, what he could not imagine in his hasty decision mindset was that the night held a surprise that would change everything instantly, a twist that to him would be almost like a divine punishment. As he forced the window, his focused gaze and nimble hands did not notice what was under the roof of that hut. At that moment he believed that everything was under control, that his action would be quick and effective, and that in a few seconds he would have what he was looking for. But the silence of the night, which seemed so peaceful, hid a hidden danger. An abandoned box under the roof, which seemed to be just rubble, actually had a story of its own, a secret that was only revealed the instant he tried to force the window. This box, forgotten by someone who passed there before, became the stage of a real battle between man and nature, a battle that no one could predict. And it was exactly at this moment that fate decided to intervene in a way that no one could have imagined, turning a simple invasion into a scene of natural chaos, of impact and instant retribution. The man spent a few minutes watching the movement around, studying every detail of the quiet motel in the dim night light. His posture was that of someone who had done it several times before, with a mixture of confidence and controlled nervousness. He chose a room that, at first glance, seemed to be empty, with no signs of people nearby, a choice that reinforced his impression that everything would be within reach without great risks. Armed with improvised tools, perhaps a wire, a screwdriver or something like that, he walked with cautious but unhesitating steps towards the window he was trying to force. For him, it was a simple mission, a routine that seemed to be under his control. The plan was clear: break in, take what you can, and disappear into the darkness without a trace. Confidence in his own ability and the apparent safety of the place was part of his mentality, an illusion that in a way gave him a sense of invulnerability. After all, he believed he was one step ahead of any problem, believing that his preparation and calmness would ensure the success of his endeavor. However, all this initial confidence hid an invisible trap, a hidden truth that would only be revealed at the exact moment when he least expected it. As he struggled to open the window, he did not realize that when he reached that abandoned box under the roof, something totally unexpected would happen. The box, which looked like just a pile of rubble, was actually a nest of giant American marimbondos, a species that, due to its aggressiveness and size, is often feared by those who know its nature. The insect, which most of the time goes unnoticed, had its refuge there, its protection from the outside world. And in that instant, he was abruptly disturbed by an action that seemed innocent, but which set off a chain reaction of impact. There was no way to foresee that a simple invasion attempt could end so dramatically, as a kind of natural punishment that does not spare those who invade their space. The attack was immediate and brutal. The marimbondos, awakened from rest, began to attack in a swarm, stinging everything that moved with stunning ferocity. The thief, who until then thought he was prepared for any situation, was taken by surprise by a force of nature that knows no bounds. The amount of stinging was such that he quickly became desperate, falling to the ground and screaming for help, while desperately trying to get away from the insects that caused him pain and anguish. Her confidence, which had seemed unshakable minutes before, turned to fear and despair. The scene, which could seem like an ordinary robbery, turned into a real spectacle of chaos and natural violence, leaving guests stunned, watching that scene of an almost surreal battle. Some began to run, others were paralyzed with fright, while the attacker writhed, trying to relieve the pain caused by the bites. The arrival of the police was swift, as if the universe was conspiring for justice to be done right then and there. Minutes later, officers arrived at the scene to find the thief covered in stings, completely desperate, begging for help. His expression of confidence had turned into a mixture of pain and humiliation, clear evidence that no matter how hard one tries to prepare for everything, nature always reserves its own lessons, often brutally, but always fairly. Behind the scenes of this story is the reflection that our decisions, no matter how planned, can be easily undone by factors that we do not even imagine, and that the true strength of the universe lies in its unpredictability. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, exploring the impact this episode has on the mindset of those who live to avoid risk, and how this experience transforms the way we face risky decisions in real life. While the man insisted forcefully on trying to open the window, his movements became more aggressive, impulsive even, hoping to speed up the process. His concentration was total, and for an instant it seemed that nothing could interrupt that moment of action. But at the exact moment when his hands pushed harder, something unexpected happened. His fingers touched a surface that looked like just an old box, long forgotten under the roof. Without thinking twice, he pressed against her in an attempt to force the glass open, and that's when the tragedy began to unfold. That object, which seemed like a simple piece of garbage, had a history of its own, a secret that only nature could keep. The box, in fact, was a nest of giant American marimbondos, a species known for its aggressiveness and impressive size. Knowing it or not, he had just disturbed one of the biggest threats to that environment, and what happened next was a clear demonstration of how nature is able to defend itself instantly and relentlessly. In the silence that once seemed so heavy, a deafening sound broke the stillness of the night. It was like an explosion of life, an uprising in the form of incessant buzzing, which quickly turned into a coordinated attack. The marimbondos, awakened from their rest, came out of hiding with a fury that no one could have foreseen. Their giant bodies, with vibrant colors of yellow and black, began to swarm, forming a mass that looked like a cloud of destruction. Each marimbondo, when attacking, threw himself with a force that could deliver a painful sting, and they spared no one. As soon as the first sting was felt, the man retreated, desperately trying to move away, but the amount of insects was frightening. The buzzing turned into screams of pain as he tried to get rid of the stings, which began to spread through his body quickly and mercilessly. The scene turned into complete chaos. The thief, until then confident in his attempt to break in, became a victim of his own recklessness. His face expressed pain and hopelessness as he tried to protect himself from the increasingly numerous bites. The impact was so strong that he fell to the ground, almost as if he had been hit by an invisible force, struggling to escape the swarm that seemed determined to punish him for his audacity. The guests who were nearby, frightened, watched everything in silence, some not sure if they should help or just observe that scene of pure natural reaction. Fear took over the environment, and the only thing that could be heard was the incessant hum of the marimbondos, who remained alert, ready to attack again if necessary. To the man, it felt like time had stopped. Every second felt like an eternity, as he writhed in pain and dread, completely overwhelmed by a force he couldn't control. It was an instant reaction, a punishment that seemed to come straight from a universe that does not tolerate invasions or disrespect. The insects, when awakened, had no plans to retreat or wait. They attacked with all their intensity, making it clear that their presence there was not a coincidence, but a natural defense of their territory. And what happened at that moment was a real demonstration of how nature responds quickly and ruthlessly in the face of a threat. From there, everything unfolded in a sequence of chaos, pain, and humiliation, which would forever change that man's perception of what it is to respect the limits of the natural environment. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this story, despite the fact that it seems like an isolated tragedy, reveals something much greater about our decisions, our actions, and the consequences that we often cannot even foresee. It's a lesson in the impact our choices can have, especially when we ignore the hidden truths the environment offers us. And more than that, it shows us that life has its mechanisms of justice, which often come in unexpected ways, of reactions that seem almost spontaneous, but that carry a clear message. The universe likes to balance things, and it does it instantly, often painfully, but always with a built-in lesson. He said, "More, that makes sense to me." The swarm advanced like a living shadow, a dark mass that seemed to move with an intelligence of its own, a force that could not be contained or deflected. Each marimbondo launched himself with a ferocity that seemed almost conscious, a silent revenge for the invasion of his sacred space. Their giant bodies, with vibrant colors that reflected the moonlight, cut through the air with frightening speed. The attack was relentless, without respite, like a storm that suddenly falls on anyone who dares to challenge the natural order of things. The thief, who until then desperately tried to protect himself, fell to the ground, completely overcome by panic. His arms went up to try to block the incessant stings, but every move felt like a losing battle. The stings reached his face, neck, arms, intense pain that spread throughout his body in a matter of seconds. Her screams of pain echoed through the parking lot, frightening guests who, until then, had not understood what was really happening. It was a scene of chaos, of a force of nature that does not accept invasions and responds with a violence that seems even inhuman, a true demonstration that life, no matter how hard we try to control it, has its own defense mechanisms. The man struggled on the ground, trying to move away, but the insects continued to attack without stopping. Their cries of suffering mingled with the deafening hum of the swarm, creating an atmosphere of pure despair. His wide eyes sought some way out, a hope that at that moment seemed as distant as peace itself. Each sting carried a feeling that the punishment was just, a kind of retribution from nature itself for his audacity to invade a territory that did not belong to him. The intensity of the marimbondo's reaction made it clear that this was not an ordinary dispute, but a real battle for survival. The sound of the bites, the frenzied movement of the swarm, and the invader's expression of pain created a scene that looked like something out of a horror movie. But it was, in fact, a natural reaction, a response that only life can give when its rules are disrespected. Some guests, still perplexed, watched the scene as they tried to understand how devastating the force of that nature could be. The feeling of helplessness took over the environment, while the thief, completely overwhelmed by suffering, tried to do the impossible, escape from that relentless attack. His movements were desperate, his breathing panting as the pain from the stings spread across his body, leaving marks both visible and invisible. It was an experience that transformed the initial confidence that everything was under his control into a humiliating natural defeat. The cries for help intensified as he tried everything to get rid of that nightmare. At that moment, the scene had become a real lesson about the limits of human arrogance in the face of the invisible and powerful forces of the planet. Each bite, each movement of escape, showed that no matter how hard we try to manipulate the environment, there are forces that simply cannot be controlled, and their reactions are fast and relentless, leaving an eternal mark on the memory of those who witness or live a situation like that. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this story reveals a true transformation of mentality, a learning journey that often only happens through extreme experiences. It exposes the hidden truth that our decisions, however planned, carry the impact of forces we cannot foresee, and that the impact of a thoughtless attitude can be greater than we imagine. It is a reflection on the impact our actions have on our own lives and those around us, as well as a lesson in humility before the universe. After all, life always has its revelations, often hidden under the veil of routine, ready to show us that the path of transformation passes through moments of confrontation with our own vulnerability. These experiences challenge us to rethink our decisions, to understand that true strength lies not in arrogance or lack of respect for the environment, but in the ability to recognize boundaries and act wisely. He said, "That makes sense to me." The scene unfolding before the guests' eyes was something that seemed to come out of a thriller or an episode of a series of natural reactions. When the swarm of marimbondos began to disperse, tired and satisfied with their answer, doors of some huts slowly opened as if someone was awakening from a deep sleep. At first, some guests came out hesitantly, with expressions of amazement mixed with fear, looking at what was happening there in front of them. Others, even more frightened, immediately retreated when they saw the cloud of insects still dispersing, as if they were witnessing a scene of chaos and natural justice at the same time. It was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a sense that it had all been some kind of collective punishment, some kind of instant karma that seemed to have come straight from the universe. Some people, when they realized what had happened, were paralyzed watching that strange spectacle, almost as if they were watching a theatrical play in which nature itself had become the protagonist. Others nervously tried to keep their composure, but their eyes revealed surprise at the speed and intensity of the attack. Few dared approach the man still struggling on the ground, covered in stings and his face scarred by pain. Still, most of them preferred to stay at a safe distance without risking getting involved in the confusion, as if they knew that this was no ordinary scene, but a crude demonstration of how the force of nature itself can act ruthlessly and without warning. Some people even laughed nervously, trying to turn the fright into a kind of humor, as a way to cope with the situation that seemed too surreal to be real. Others, more sensitive, looked on with a certain compassion, wondering how painful and humiliating the experience must have been for the invader. Despite the fear and shock, no one approached, understanding that the moment demanded respect for the force that had just manifested. The scene seemed a kind of silent lesson, a reminder that there are forces that we cannot control, and that nature, with its ancient wisdom, always finds a way to exercise its justice quickly and definitively. Each of these people carried within them a mixture of emotions, a silent understanding that often the universe responds without warning, directly and ruthlessly, when its rules are flouted. In this tension-laden environment, silence took over again, as guests watched what was left of that chaos. The man, now covered in stings, seemed increasingly helpless, unable to move freely in the face of the pain he felt. His eyes sought some way out, a hope that all this could end soon, but the scene that was drawn there showed that sometimes life itself presents us with a lesson that cannot be ignored. And this lesson comes straight, bluntly, making it clear that our actions have consequences, often invisible, often instantaneous, that shape our journey in ways we would never have imagined. Each person there was touched in some way by that experience, carrying with them the understanding that the impact of our decisions, however simple or insignificant they may seem, can trigger reactions that alter the course of everything around us. It's a reminder that the universe, in its wisdom, always finds a way to restore balance, even if in painful or unexpected ways. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this story reveals a real transformation in the mentality of those who witness or live a situation like this. It shows us that many times, our actions carry a load of impact that we cannot even measure at the time, and that the consequences can come in ways that are not under our control, reinforcing the idea that respect for natural forces is fundamental. What happens there in those seconds of chaos is a kind of backstage of a great revelation, that life is a constant exchange, a learning journey where the impact of our decisions often points to hidden truths that only show up when we least expect it. These extreme experiences challenge us to rethink our attitudes, to reflect on our own vulnerability to the forces of the universe, and to understand that true strength lies not in arrogance or in trying to manipulate the environment, but in the humility of recognizing our limits. It is in this recognition that we find true transformation, a change of mindset that can accompany us for life, helping us to act with more wisdom, more respect, and more care for the impact that our actions can generate, because, deep down, everything we do reverberates in our journey in one way or another. Minutes after the commotion, the tranquility of that scene was abruptly interrupted by sirens in the distance, growing rapidly in the direction of the motel. The guests who were in the area, still frightened, began to exchange worried glances, while some slowly approached, curious to understand what had happened. The police arrived with surprising speed, as if the emergency calls had been answered by a force that seemed already aware of that event. When officers disembarked, they found the scene looking like a mix of chaos and natural justice, with the man lying on the ground, covered in bruises, his face scarred by pain he couldn't hide. His expression of defeat was clear, his eyes empty of hope, as he tried to protect himself from the stings that still burned on his skin. The police, trained to deal with emergency situations, quickly assessed the painting without needing much conversation. It was evident that what had happened there did not require a traditional police intervention, because nature itself had done the job definitively and quietly. The scene revealed a kind of instant resolution, as if justice had been applied by a force that doesn't ask for explanations, just acts. The officers calmly and professionally approached the man, who was still trying to recover from the stings, while his eyes sought some kind of mercy. There was no need for chases, exchange of fire or clashes. The very force of nature, represented by the giant marimbondos, had done what humans often cannot do by themselves: set a limit, impose a lesson in respect for the environment and its rules. That episode turned into a kind of example of how the impact of our actions can be greater than we imagine, and often the fastest and most effective response comes from a natural mechanism that no one can control. The officers had a quick reaction, helping to stabilize the man who was still moaning in pain, while the frightened guests watched without many words, absorbing that scene that seemed like a warning from the universe. The scene of a thief defeated not by force or weapons, but by a natural response, reinforced a powerful message. When we underestimate the forces that surround us, we can end up paying a much higher price than we expected. The decision to invade an unknown space, to challenge boundaries without respect, had been paid for with a lesson in humility, in a way that no one could deny. The police, at the end of their proceedings, made it clear that the intervention of nature showed that justice can happen in ways that we do not even imagine, in a way that transcends rational understanding, but that is extremely effective. In that instant, the story of that man became a narrative that everyone there could reflect. Our actions carry consequences that may not be evident at the time, but that reveal themselves clearly and definitively when we least expect it. The force of nature, with its ancient wisdom, teaches us that the impact of our choices is something we cannot simply ignore or underestimate. Every decision we make, no matter how minor it may seem, can trigger reactions that change the course of our history, often in an unexpected, abrupt, and definitive way. And so as the police organized their departure, silence reigned again, leaving everyone with a sense that the universe had put an end to that lesson of respect, of balance, and of instant justice, which, even without warning, always finds a way to remind us that life works by its own rules. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this story reveals that behind every decision, no matter how simple or ordinary it may seem, there is a hidden truth. The impact it can generate on our trajectory, often silently, but always powerfully. It is as if the universe is always attentive, ready to balance the forces when they become unbalanced. And this story is a clear example of this. It shows that our actions don't happen in a vacuum, that every step taken has a consequence that can manifest instantly or over time in ways we can't always predict. This learning journey reveals to us that true transformation begins when we recognize our limits and respect the environment, be it natural or social, because deep down, life works like a mirror, reflecting our attitudes back to us, often in a way that makes us rethink everything we thought was safe or controllable. And by understanding this, we begin a journey of greater awareness, of choices more aligned with the harmony we seek, even in the most unexpected situations. The story of that thief who thought that the night would be easy, but ended up being punished in an unexpected way, quickly spread throughout the region, gaining prominence in the local media and even in street conversations. Many saw in her a symbol that justice, no matter how slow or distant it may seem, always finds a way to make itself present. The message that was clear to those who followed the episode closely was that the evil that plans to hurt others eventually ends up finding its own punishment one way or another. This lesson, which seems so simple at first glance, has a depth that goes beyond what it seems, touching on the essence of how life works in practice. It reinforces a hidden truth that many prefer to ignore. Our actions, however minor, carry with them a consequence that sooner or later reveals itself. And the impact of these actions is often proportional to the degree of arrogance or contempt we show for the environment, people, or the rules of the game. When someone chooses the wrong path, without thinking about the possible consequences, he is, in fact, betting all the chips on the illusion that nothing will happen. But the hidden truth that lies behind the scenes of this story is that life has its own balancing mechanisms, which do not allow themselves to be manipulated or ignored any longer. The universe, with its ancient wisdom, responds quickly and often ruthlessly, showing that natural justice is in no hurry, but it is infallible. In this case, the answer came in the form of a force of nature that, when triggered, made it clear that respect for the environment, rules, and life itself is fundamental. The episode's impact, therefore, was not just a momentary lesson, but a lasting reflection on how much our decisions shape our journey. The narrative spread because, deep down, it touched a common wound in society. The idea that no matter how hard we try to escape the consequences, they always appear in one form or another, often more forcefully than we imagine. What happened there was a clear demonstration that the universe does not usually play on duty, that nature responds with impressive speed when its rules are violated. It was not a planned punishment, not a conscious revenge, but a natural reaction that arose from the very balance of forces. It is as if our every action were a seed planted in fertile soil, which at the right time germinates and bears fruit, good or bad, depending on what was grown. And this story leaves an eternal lesson. Those who choose the wrong path at the right time will face their own truth in a way that we often cannot even imagine until we pass through it. This revelation, although simple on the surface, carries a depth that transforms the mentality of those who come to understand that life is not a game of luck, but a sequence of choices. Every decision, every attitude, is a seed that can bloom or rot, depending on the care we give to what we plant. The impact of a misguided action, such as that of the thief that day, serves as a warning to everyone. Life has a way of balancing the accounts, often quickly and definitively, making it clear that respect for the invisible forces that govern the universe is fundamental. After all, the truest justice does not need a judge or a court, it only responds to what has been done. And that response, for the most part, is proportional to what has been planted, whether in our own history or in the history of the world around us. Thus, each of us has the opportunity to reflect on our own choices, knowing that their impact may be greater than we realize, and that the hidden truth is that life always finds a way to make ends meet one way or another. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this story, no matter how extreme or even surreal it may seem, reveals a truth that is often hidden in the daily routine of all of us. The transformation that it causes in our mentality is something that deserves attention, as it leads us to reflect on the real impact of our decisions. When we act impulsively or without thinking about the consequences, we are, in practice, playing a piece on the board of a larger play where many invisible forces act silently. And that's exactly where the importance of understanding the behind the scenes of this dynamic comes in. The impact of a single action, however small it may seem, can trigger a series of events that completely change the course of our history, often in a way that we could not predict at the time. These moments of learning, although difficult, help to build a more conscious mentality, more prepared to deal with the reactions that the universe, in an often mysterious way, sends us. This story of the thief attacked by giant marimbondos is a powerful metaphor for the journey of transformation that we are all subject to live. It shows us that our actions do not happen in a vacuum, that their impact is a current that stretches along our entire trajectory. When we ignore the rules of the environment, whether in relation to nature or to people, we are actually putting our own integrity at risk. And the hidden truth that we often don't want to realize is that the universe has balancing mechanisms that work like a mirror. What we give, we get back, often proportionally. This understanding helps us develop a more mature mindset, more attentive to the small decisions that, accumulated over time, shape who we really are. Moreover, this story serves as a reminder that true justice does not depend on human courts or punishments, but on a wisdom that comes from within the natural environment itself. When we disrespect this balance, whether through impulsive attitudes, arrogance, or ignorance, we are actually opening a door for greater forces to show us that there are limits that cannot be crossed. And these limits, no matter how invisible they may seem, often manifest themselves quickly and definitively. The impact of these actions reverberates in our life journey, leaving marks that can be both learning and pain, depending on how we decide to face the consequence. This reflection leads us to understand that our trajectory is a kind of script written by several hands, where each decision is a line that can strengthen or weaken our history. When we act without respect for the forces that surround us, we miss the opportunity to evolve, to learn from mistakes, and to create a mindset more aligned with the harmony of the universe. Each choice is a seed that we plant in fertile soil, and the way we care for it determines what will be born from there. True transformation happens when we recognize our limits and learn to respect the natural cycle of things, realizing that life, with all its revelations, always offers us an opportunity to start over, to adjust the course, and to evolve. And then, thinking about all this, the question remains, to what extent do our actions reflect on our transformation journey? Are we really aware of the hidden truths the universe is trying to show us, or are we blinded by our own choices? This story of the thief and the giant marimbondos serves as an invitation to reflect on our own posture in the face of the invisible forces that govern our existence, because deep down, learning to listen to what the environment, nature, or even the universe tells us is one of the greatest transformations we can achieve in our life. And this transformation, if faced with courage and humility, opens doors to a new mentality, more conscious, more aligned with the wisdom that exists behind the simplest actions. He says, "That makes sense to me. If you made it this far, it's because this story touched on some important point for you. Perhaps it has made you reflect on attitudes, on the impact that our choices can have on our lives, or even on the silent force that nature and the universe exert around us. I thank you for being with me until this moment, because sharing this type of content is an opportunity to think differently, to see things with more attention and respect. If this chat made sense, a good idea is to subscribe to the channel, so you stay on top of other stories that remind us of how life is full of lessons that are often right in front of us, just waiting for the right moment to appear. Leave a comment below saying you made it all the way to the end and what this story brought up for reflection for you. It can be a phrase like, "This message was for me," or something that really touched you. Thus we can create a stronger connection and exchange experiences that help everyone grow. And of course, your like is a natural way to show that this content made sense to you, that it was a worthwhile conversation. There is a video here on the side that complements this subject. Click and continue with me there, so we can move forward together, exploring stories that teach us and inspire us to live with more attention and respect for what life offers us.